Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is HBR Talk. I am here with the HBR Talk Badgers, Lauren Brooks and Hannah Wallen, and we're going to be doing number 229, AOC. So we're going to return to the video from last week. We're going to do it next week because this just dropped, this article, and I think that we have to talk about it. For those of you who are, maybe you're here because you're not, because you're interested in men's issues and you have a problem with feminism, but maybe you're not interested in the political, landscape, in particular of the United States. I understand, but this is important because it is ultimately about feminism, because of course it is, because feminism makes everything political and they make everything a feminist or women's issue. And that's what the purpose of it is. So you guys might know that AOC was on the cover of GQ. And here's a slightly edited version of the of the cover. And usually, just saying, usually Gentleman's Quarterly or GQ magazine has men on the cover. But every so often, because they want to remind us who the real boss is, they will put a woman on the cover. I think they've done it with Jennifer Lopez. They've done this with Beyonce, I believe, was on it. So they do this. It just sort of depends on if it's the right kind of woman. So, but that's not really the story. So yeah, she made the cover. But what is actually most interesting is the interview that the featured article is about, which is essentially, well, let me just read the intro to this. AOC's fight for the future. Almost 4 years after the improbable arrival in Washington, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has become the political voice of a generation and a cultural star whose power transcends politics. Now, as the country hurtles towards the midterm elections, AOC opens up about the battle over abortion, her own shot at the presidency, and why it's critical that men step up now. So
I'm laughing at everything about that, but the first sentence just kills. Improbable. She's the boy band of Congress. Her entire campaign was orchestrated. She was paid to run. Has everybody forgotten that?
I swear, I think they had Diddy on the team. They were making the fucking band when they picked it. They handpicked this chick. Let's not forget where she came from. The Justice Democrats.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Oh my god.
Yeah, which is basically the Young Turk, Sam Cedar, I think, and what's the name of the guy who's always trying to tell us he's a moderate, but he obviously a far left progressive. Yeah, they all basically knew her, and they use another guy to put her in place. I mean, you can find the backstory of all of this on YouTube. I recommend a video by Mr. Reagan, I think, and I've had Mr. Reagan on the show before. He did a whole video on who AOC is and where she came from and all of it. So, but yeah, this is I'm glad you guys brought this up, because I've been talking a lot about cultural power, cultural dominance, and how leftists, feminists, progressives, Hollywood elites, whatever you want to call it, but it's all of those and more. One of the things that they try to do, and this is part of their engineering, is they try their damnedest to essentially create positive PR around people or ideas that they hold. And there's a number of different ways they do it. They try to make it look cool, which is what AOC is for. She's young, she's in politics, she's a woman of color, and they use all of that to get people to be like, oh, that's cool. We don't have a lot of, and that's why AOC makes these, when she does and she's, big on social media, so she puts up viral videos, and so there's a big like reaching out to the younger generation and to women, and she's really good for that. Even though, like, most of the things she says are completely vapid or they're just ridiculous, like they're not arguments, but they sound nice. They sound really nice. And unfortunately, a lot of people respond to that, and especially women. Oh, that sounds really nice. Yeah, I care about people. I'm not a bad person. I'm a good person. And she's telling me she's a good person. So we must both be good people together, you know?
Or.
Yeah, that's all it is. Like, you know, it's empty. And then another thing that they do is they try to convince people that the position they hold is not only the most popular position, like the majority of people hold these positions, which you can't confirm because in the meanwhile, they're censoring everybody else and they're basically suppressing their voices through big tech or whatever. But then they're also saying to you, no, we hold the majority position. We are on the right side of history, right? And if you want to be on the right side with us, who is the majority, we promise, then you will also hold these positions. And there's a number of different ways that they do that. So, like, that's why, and they always push the same narrative. And this is also the reason, by the way, that they despise the fact that there are young men who are not going along with this. And they're, like, seeking out answers from other places. Because you can't do that. You have to get the answers from us. Because we're the ones that have them. Right?
It's not even necessarily that they use the majority, because they don't. They use the morality. They try to beat you in the head with our views are right, and if you think that we're wrong, then you're bad. You're a misogynist. You're a X, Y, and Z.
But the trick is that their moral position is actually not in the majority. It's actually in the minority, but they want you to think that they're holding the popular position. It's like, you know, I mentioned this to Lindsay. This is the reason why they always go on about democracy, even though the United States is not a democracy. They do it because what they're trying to get people to think is, if most people hold this view, then why aren't we following that? Why are we listening to the minority? And
well, and it's also to make you embarrassed and afraid to hold a different view.
Yeah, to make you hold a minority position. And the thing
it's high school politics.
It is, but it works, and in particular, it works on women. But like the other thing is that, you know, they want to convince you that their position is the most popular. And there was an example of this. I can't remember exactly what it was about, but Karine Jean-Pierre, is that her name? The White House press secretary right now?
Yes.
Well, she was like challenged on something by the only guy who ever challenges her, Peter Doocy. And she basically, to shut him down, she basically just said, well, the majority of people agree with us, so and that's it.
Yeah.
Like your perspective doesn't mean anything. There's no such thing as right or wrong. There's no such thing as like what is the correct approach to something, what's the incorrect. No, we hold the majority opinion, which, by the way, you can't even confirm, not that it matters. But like, you know, like that's how they work. So that's the same thing here. It's in everything. So this is why GQ in their culture section does a whole thing on AOC, and they also tell us she's a cultural force. She's a cultural star, right? But they're clearly lying, but like if they think that if they can convince enough people that AOC is the thing that they're claiming she is, then she will have, or at least in theory, she'll have cultural impact on the way that people view our culture, our country, how they vote, their politics, everything. And it's all based in their big fat PR campaign, you know, for people like AOC. And of course, these people, because they support AOC, I can only assume that GQ isn't even like some neo-lib thing. It's like far left, right? And I think that that's probably the case for most of these outlets, because the people who work in them, they're all activists, and so they all live in like, you know, Manhattan and shit. So they don't really know what they're asking about, but they really want to oppose regular Americans. You know, those hayseeds, those fucking rednecks that live in the, you know, flyover country. So this is another thing. There's so much going on. It's really fascinating, to be honest, of like how many like things are happening, and I don't hear a lot about it. So I think that like my ultimate point with this is that they're trying to convince us that they are more powerful, more influential, and higher in number than they actually are. And when I say that, I'm not talking, because I know some people will say, well, liberals are basically half the country. Yeah, I'm not talking about liberals. I'm talking about leftists. Leftists have infiltrated the liberal population, and they have gone in repeating the same things that liberals have said. Yeah, those conservatives, they're so backwards. And then like the liberals are like, oh, these people seem all right. And then what happens is the liberals start experiencing leftism. Oh, I've been censored. I wonder why that is. Hey guys, why are you doing that? You're not one of those conservatives, are you? And so it just keeps creeping, and the liberals can't see that their enemies are the left, and that the conservatives are probably their allies, and that they should probably work with them, in my opinion. We can deal with our differences afterwards, but I think we have to deal with this. And I think that this is like the major obstacle that that liberals have, because we've all been to some degree conditioned to see extreme conservatism or whatever they call it, as like the true enemy of everything, while those same people who have made those allegations erode our rights and attack them constantly and demonize men and cause division between the genders and the races and everything, while they're also telling us we're not doing that. Those conservatives are doing that. And everywhere I look, when I see conservatives talking about these problems, they're basically just saying the same shit that a lot of liberal commentators are saying. And I'm like, why aren't you guys talking to each other? So, because that would actually expose how small the left is. That's one of the reasons too, because they have a lot of cover by like hiding amongst the liberals and constantly telling the liberals what they want to hear, while also warning them against the enemy on the other side. But there's also
another problem among conservatives. This is going to sound like an oxymoron, but there are progressive conservatives that they still believe in social engineering, because progressivism at its heart and soul is just social engineering. Leftist progressives are eugenicists. They are class warriors. They want control of your money. They want to control the banks. They want to control how you think about other people in terms of what you do and don't accept, in a way that your boundaries, your personal boundaries, are broken down, and you don't protect yourself against invasion of various ideologies and such. Right? That's the progressive left. But conservative progressives think that they can use that same scope and degree and style of authoritarianism to get us back to some traditional idea that it's kind of a television version of traditionalism that never existed in real life. And they want to, they really want to create Pleasantville as a nation, and they're not going to be able to do it because it's not in human nature. The authoritarianism is the same. It's just a different level and degree of control and a different angle at attacking your personal boundaries. So they're willing to work with progressive Democrats because they're both authoritarian progressives. They're both social engineers, and they're willing to work with them to gain the authoritarianism that they need in order to engineer your country. But they don't. Once they get that control, they think that they're going to be able to take over and control it their way. And the truth is, they won't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that position is going to be popular, but there's no harm in being on the lookout for authoritarianism in any form that it takes.
It's not popular with the public, but it is unfortunately the establishment of the Republican Party, and it's part of the reason for the anti-Trump Republican movement. Because Trump was not authoritarian like that. And it's like, I met a lot of politicians that were like this. Like they just don't think people have the capacity to make their own moral choices.
Yeah, they can't be trusted with their own ability to make moral choices.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Like, if that is the bulk of the Republican Party, it makes sense then that so much in that party is being rejected. That's why the MAGA movement is growing, because it's either because normal Republicans are finally getting what they want. Maybe they never liked it before, or they are realizing, like, that it's probably better if we live in a society that's more free, so people can live however they wish, as opposed to one that's been engineered. So, but anyway, I'm gonna move on, but I just wanted to say that. And of course, if we ever get to a point where that starts to look like it's a concern, I would be right next to you to reject it too. So I'm not picking sides here, but I know that, like, what we're experiencing right now is not a product of those Republicans, although they are, like, they're not really in the way.
Yeah.
They're, like, because there's a lot of corruption. So, these we can call them swampy Republicans. You can call them neocons or rhinos or whatever. But
they're the establishment, and I mean, like, if you want to see the progression of what they are doing to, like, the grassroots of the Democrat Party and the grassroots of the Republican Party that have kind of rejected the establishment, authoritarian, we are going to tell you what to think and you're going to like it, politicians and their media and everything. Go back and look at what was done to the Tea Party, because the Tea Party was not anything like it's portrayed in the media.
No, it's like the populist movement.
Right. It was the MAGA movement before the MAGA movement. And what happened was, you had working class people and small business owners and folks that were really dissatisfied with the way the two major political parties were dealing with economic issues and family law and everything. And they basically gathered together and tried to get politicians elected locally in their areas. So their councilmen, their county commissioners, their state level senators and congressmen, and eventually governors and so on. And what ended up happening was the news media really wanted to portray them as racist. So they would, when they would take pictures or film events, they would avoid all of the people at the events that were Black or Hispanic or anything but white men. And then they actually had people infiltrate these events with racist messages, and fights started because the people at the events, the people who were actually part of the Tea Party, did not want those people there. And then they would say violence broke out at these events. Well, yeah, violence broke out at these events because they would have somebody show up with a sign that said something horribly offensive that the people that were there didn't want and were embarrassed by, because there were people there that were part of the event that were directly insulted by it. And they wanted everybody that agreed with them to be able to come there without being insulted like that. And, like, this is not a new tactic. I was at a DeWine ice cream social one time when for a moment it looked like we were being protested by the KKK. I shit you not. They showed up with these weird protest signs, and they're in full KKK garb, right? And they're holding these signs in front of them, and all of the Black people at the event just, like, came forward and stood across the street from them and stared at them. And one guy held a sign up over his head, and the signs were calling the people at the event racist. And we were like, why is the KKK calling us racist? then the guy holding the sign up over his head, his sleeves came down and you could see that he was black. And so we were like, okay, this is not the KKK.
It's the black KKK.
This is, this is people mocking the KKK by showing up in full KKK garb, but they forgot that when you cover up your whole body, people can't tell the difference. And the only difference was their signs. And they were really raucous. They were really mad. They were loud, obnoxious, and everything. The best part of the whole event was Mrs. DeWine walked across the street with this huge tray of water, like little bottles of water and glasses of water and everything, and offered them something to drink because it was hot as fuck out there. And yes, Jen Bottle, I was at that event. And that was a heck of a, like, we were all laughing about it later because they didn't know what to do. Like, she just went over and offered them hospitality. I mean, and they're like, we're over here being angry at you. How dare you? Why are you? They left.
Maybe maybe it was just a photo op. Maybe some press showed up and took pictures.
Oh yeah, there was press there.
Yeah, and they went back.
I was there.
This social is a KKK meetup. I mean, they do it. They do it.
Oh yeah,
they've done it more recently, so, right? Like,
yeah, their tactics. It's just that's what they do. That is how they misrepresent everything. Yeah. And like later on, when you looked at the media reports on that event, what happened versus the way it was reported, like no, it was a very short protest. Like what were they going to do after she went over and offered them water and invited them in to talk? They weren't going to come in and talk. They didn't want to be persuaded or try to persuade us, so they just left.
Yep. Okay. So let's get into the article. For her first 2 days in Washington. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked the few blocks from her apartment to her congressional office nearly every morning, a routine she felt forced to change after a treasonous mob stormed the Capitol. Now
she wasn't there.
And the only treasonous mob that stormed the Capitol was the Joe Biden regime. Thank you. Let's carry on.
Also, you walked a few blocks. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, it's probably good to walk a little bit every day.
Well, I mean, it's kind of what she does. It's her shtick, right? She walks everywhere. You remember the picture of her shoes with the holes in the bottom and everything.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, she's just like us guys.
Like, she's just one of those women who doesn't know how to drive.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we're not allowed to say that, are we?
Now she drives most days. A comically short commute she considers a necessary safety precaution. But for some reason, she's not quite sure why. The Congresswoman decided to walk to work on what would become Washington's most tumultuous morning since the insurrection. Can you guess what that tumultuous morning was?
Yeah, I just want to say this. Only a woman could say, I don't know why I did this thing that normally I would consider terribly dangerous, but today I just felt like, only a woman could say that without being really embarrassed that she made a decision about her own safety without knowing why she made that decision. No man would say that. I don't know why I took that big risk.
And that's
out of the blue.
Yeah, and that's if you believe what she's saying on the face of it, which I don't. She absolutely knew why she was walking. She wanted the attention. She was expecting it.
She knew.
Yeah.
Yep. As she reached the Capitol grounds on June 24th, a group of men stopped her for a photo.
Ooh.
No.
I said, hello. And how are you all doing? She'd later recall. They're like, well, we've definitely been a lot better given this morning. End quote. I don't know what that means. This was how the Congresswoman learned that the Supreme Court had gutted the constitutional right to abortion established by Roe v. Wade. I see. So
there is no constitutional right to abortion.
No,
abortion is not in the Constitution.
No.
Bodily autonomy is not really in the Constitution. Now, you could say liberty is, but we have murder laws, and nobody says they violate the Constitution. Nobody says murder laws violate the pursuit of happiness either. The right to life, on the other hand, is in the Constitution.
Yep.
So yeah, there's no right even to privacy in the Constitution.
And in fact, life comes before liberty. Life, liberty,
Right.
and the pursuit of you have to be alive to enjoy the rest of these things.
Yeah.
See, the only thing they can rely on for a right to abortion is the unlawful search and seizure. And since you are not being searched and nothing is being seized, if you're told no, it's not legal for someone to provide you with this. That's, like if forced abortion would violate the right to freedom from unlawful search and seizure, but not being told no about an abortion. There's no right to abortion in the Constitution.
Yep.
Unless your pregnancy is threatening your life.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the article. Roe v. Wade, right. The ruling had been anticipated for weeks after a draft opinion from the court's conservative faction leaked, but somehow much of Washington still managed to appear blindsided. Democrats had expected to spend the afternoon celebrating the passage of a new gun control law. Now their day had more
because of course they would.
Awake. Yeah, but I don't think that one passed. I think that is it Clarence Thomas? I think he stopped both or was involved with it.
Thank God for him.
Yes.
I know.
And like this actually the I think the first judge to face the level of false allegations that we saw with the Kavanaugh hearing was Clarence Thomas, and what he went through, what he weathered to get into that seat and defend the Constitution the way he does and defend the American people the way he does. Like, this man is a warrior deserving of everybody's respect, whether you agree with his rulings or not. So I'm not just saying this because I do. I mean, I do agree with him, but yeah, I mean, I can't overemphasize how much admiration and respect I have for him, given what he's been through and how he responded to it, and the dignity, just the unbelievable dignity that he maintained in that situation was just. You should go back if you have not, if you didn't live through it or you don't remember it. And you haven't seen it, you should go back and watch the available videos of that hearing, because it was every bit as ridiculous and stupid as the Kavanaugh hearings. And somehow he maintained a very fatherly dignity that I can't even communicate it. You just have to go back and see.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to finish this section, and then I want to try and jump ahead to, I think she says something about masculinity later. So, okay. Democrats had expected to spend the afternoon celebrating the passage of a new gun control law. Now their day had morphed into a wake. Out on the steps of the Capitol, a group of lawmakers gathered to sing God Bless America, a pre-planned photo op that now read as a hopelessly out of touch. Angry Americans were spilling into the streets, and elected Democrats were singing campfire songs. Ocasio-Cortez knew where she needed to be, and it wasn't a sing-along. And so she, because she's like a better than average Democrat, because she cares about the people, guys.
Yeah,
she goes, she went, like, while they were over here singing songs and not murdering Republicans, I mean, not fighting back, she went out into the crowd and, like, held a woman in her arms while as she wept. She literally said this. A sobbing young woman found the Congresswoman and threw herself into her arms. I'm so scared, she wept. I'm so scared.
Oh my gosh. No, you have to. I'm so scared, she wept. I'm so scared. But they really should have done this in the form of a comic book, like a series of pages in a comic book, because it's written that way. They're trying to turn her into a cross between a Greek goddess and a Marvel superhero, or maybe a DC superhero. I don't know.
Some kind of mother.
Whichever ones are.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell which comic series. Like, comics are a little melodramatic. They have to be, like, to keep your attention and everything. But like this has that same flavor brand of melodrama that you get in a comic book.
Yeah,
and it's just like, oh.
Yeah, that's what they're doing, because they're actually pretty good at this. So they're really great at creating narratives and like making them feel like something you would see on a TV show or in a movie. And then they think that people will think that it's like what's in TV and film is real because you're seeing it in real life. Like they do these parallels. And I think it works. And this also helps them because they can continue to make these really shitty TV shows and movies and then use the same kind of narrative tricks that they use in the media. And people will think, oh, yeah, this is realistic. I could see She-Hulk and Megan Thee Stallion twerking in the office. That like that all just makes, why not? Why wouldn't I do that? You know, they're bonding. So anyway. So I'm going to read us some super chats, and then I will look for another section. So Senior Sticks gave us $2 and says, this might be Hillary Clinton's chance to come back. I mean,
Jesus.
If it hasn't happened by now, it's never going to happen. I'm sorry, all you, to the 2 Hillary Clinton fans we have in our audience. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but I can understand your optimism, I guess. So
the neat thing that would happen if Hillary Clinton would run is that we would get a rematch, because I'm pretty sure that unless something really unexpected happens, Trump's gonna run. He'd have to have some change in his health, or
unless he runs into some health problem.
Like, and it's if he runs against Hillary again, he's gonna smash her. And if Hillary,
Hulk,
not that kind of smash,
Hulk smash.
Yeah, he's gonna Hulk smash her, like crushed completely. The dust of Hillary will be blowing in the wind for all of 2 seconds before it's gone, and then we'll be told how misogynistic the campaign was. Or
again,
they will pull out every single stop they have to cheat in the election and get caught. One of those 2 things will happen.
Yeah,
like
I don't think it's gonna be Hillary, but
no.
I think that I don't think they have anyone, so it might just have to be Joe, assuming that he's able, and or maybe Kamala, but I don't know. She's, I mean, Kamala checks more boxes. But I don't think
Kamala's not electable.
She's not. She's not electable.
Even her own party does not like her.
Yeah,
and it's very hard to debate somebody when they won't stop cackling like the Wicked Witch of the West. Like, what are you going to do? You ask a question about the economy, and she comes out with, "I'll get you by putting in your little dog too."
Or she goes on about the passage of time.
Yes.
So I got another super chat from Dark Knight Dev for $2, and he doesn't write anything. If you meant to write something, you can tag @Badger Livestreams in a regular chat comment, and I will be on the lookout for it. But thank you for the super chat. Sorry if your message didn't go through. I don't know why that would be the case. And then Meredith G, I believe Dan gives us $5 and says, "Don't give up." And so thank you, Dan. We won't, if we can. Meredith G gives us $5 and says, YouTube censored me so they don't have to get my money. AOC is dangerous because she is specifically packaged to appeal to the young people in order to indoctrinate them. She is a fool that should not be underestimated. I agree 100%. We shouldn't just ridicule and laugh at her, because remember, she does have tremendous, like, disproportionate cultural cachet. And that
really quick point. Before we go on about AOC, if YouTube is censoring you, do a super chow.
Yeah,
super chows will never censor you.
No, that's what Meredith
everybody
did.
needs to. Yeah. Everybody needs to hear that. If YouTube is censoring you, do a super chow, because we will at least get that, even if we don't get it right away.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, thank you, Meredith. Yeah. Again, like, if you guys want to avoid any chance of this happening, just do the super chow, which is there's a link in the description. It's Honey Badger. Wait, what is it again? Honey Badger Oh no, feedthebadger.com. Yeah, feedthebadger.com/just the tip. But it's in the description. So,
Yeah.
All right, and then Jonathan Doman gives us $50. Thank you, Jonathan, and says, "I love y'all. This is my last super chow. No reflection on y'all. I will see you next time." All right, $50. Thank you, sir. That's great. So, let us go back.
But regarding AOC, you're right. It is important to take her seriously in that she is developing a pretty big amount of pull in the Democrat Party.
Yeah, I mean,
she's
kind of like not the main part of the Democrat Party. She's like the part that the establishment Democrats, the neolibs, don't like.
But she is
a very strong force because, again, she appeals to young people and women.
And she is starting to really get comfortable stepping on Nancy Pelosi's toes. Yeah. And Nancy Pelosi has had the reins of the Democrat Party, along with Chuck Schumer. They've had the reins of the Democrat Party for like my whole life, I think. So this is the young wolf going after the alpha wolf in the pack, essentially. And the alpha wolves are getting old, and their politics are getting old, their policies are getting old, and there's a whole young faction within the Democrat Party of millennials and Zoomers that are just flat out communist. So AOC can appeal to them by saying anything that sounds communist. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if when she gets into full power that she's going to uphold that or not. It doesn't matter because they won't figure that out. They won't look at how fake she is. They will listen to what she says. They will believe their ears before they believe their eyes or their history. Yeah. And they'll support her until she turns on them. Yeah. And she will.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the article. Whoa. Or almost, so this is a quote from her. She's speaking to the interviewer. So I jumped ahead a couple paragraphs. For almost every woman that has gotten an abortion, there is a man who has either been affected or liberated by that abortion too, she told me. In this moment, it's really only going to be the vulnerability of men and men talking to other men that gives us the greatest hope of shifting things the fastest, soonest.
I noticed she said affected, but then she just dismissed all of the men that were affected.
Right. Exactly. And not only that, but, it's the way she's approaching this is, or the way she says that this could be better is if men just go off into a corner and talk amongst themselves. It's not like we need to open the lines of communication because when an abortion happens, yes, unless the woman never tells the man that she was pregnant in the first place and that an abortion happened, of course he's not going to know or be affected until he maybe eventually later finds out that information. But to approach it as, only some men have a reaction. No, every man would have a reaction. Maybe it's not the one you expect, but it's still a reaction, right? And the fact that she's just not willing to say, all right, well, let's all talk together. It's just men should talk and figure out your emotions. And even
if they're not allowed to do that, because when men have their own spaces where they go talk among themselves, then women get upset and scared and call them misogynists and wonder what they're doing in there that might be anti-woman.
Yeah, it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yep.
Also, she's presuming that if a woman gets an abortion, it liberates her and the man. Well, how do we know that men want women to get abortions every time? Well,
I'm assuming that when she said affected, she means the men who don't want their baby mama to get an abortion, that have to deal with the fact that their baby was killed and they couldn't do anything about it. Because
maybe.
that is profoundly impacting on a guy.
Yeah.
There was a viral video of a guy sitting outside of the abortion clinic just bawling his eyes out because he couldn't do anything. There was nothing he can do. The mother had made the decision, and that was it. And he's just losing his mind. And come on, women need to stop acting as if it doesn't affect them too. Just because the baby is not inside of a man's body doesn't mean that he doesn't also feel a connection.
Yeah.
The guy was willing to surrender. The guy was willing to surrender every aspect of his freedom and autonomy just to save that baby's life, and didn't appeal to her at all. That was just, and it was a situation where, you know, like, you don't know what her decisions were based on, but they clearly were not based on anything that he said.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right. I'm going to continue. So basically, don't bear in mind, men don't have any choice when it comes to abortion. Like they don't get a say at all. They're either going to raise that baby, which is probably the ideal situation in most cases, with the mother. They're going to be excluded from that baby, but will be expected to pay child support, or that baby was just be aborted, and no matter what he feels about it, doesn't matter. At least in a state,
it does not liberate you.
No.
It excludes you.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a difference between liberated and excluded.
Yeah. So anyway, the point is, men don't get a say regardless of how they feel about it. We'd agreed at the onset of our conversation that day to lean into difficult questions about gender, with a specific focus on what men need to be doing to combat misogyny. And so I asked the Congresswoman why she believes men so often opt out. Opt out? What does that mean? Opt out of what? Like, wait.
They're terrified of MGTOW.
Oh, I know. Why? You asked okay, well, anyway, they go on.
I think she's saying opting out of combating misogyny is what she's saying. Is that like they're just sitting back and...
Yeah, like that's what I was thinking. Like, what do you mean opting out of fighting misogyny? Misogyny doesn't... frankly, the only place it might come from are feminists. Like, they're the only ones, I think. But okay.
Well, but the real disgusting thing here is the whole premise is that misogyny only exists because men hate women. It has nothing to do, no bearing on women at all, right? It doesn't matter. Anything she does is perfectly fine. You just have to accept it. And if you don't like it, you hate women, you're a misogynist.
Right.
And the thing is, misogyny doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
If you look at it, our entire society is gynocentric. Even men who sort of separate themselves from women, even the most stringent MGTOW is not hunting women down and trying to kill them. It's an abnormal thing for somebody to do that. Like serial killers that do that are fucked in the head. Yeah. They're not part of an ideology. They're not subscribing to a set of beliefs.
Right.
They're literally mentally ill and completely screwed and you know, have to be locked up. So when somebody actually exhibits misogyny, we lock them up. And then, you know, we start just expanding the definition of misogyny to well beyond what it really is. Like, if you look at the definition of misandry, it just says hatred of men or something along the lines of hatred of men. And misogyny used to be considered just hatred of women. But now it's like hatred, fear. It's almost diffused to the point where if you disagree with people who claim to speak for women, you're considered a misogynist.
Yeah.
That's not true. That's bullshit. You're not actually a misogynist. And if you find an example of real misogyny in the world, it is in somebody who is so abnormal that we separate them out from the entire rest of society, and we fear them as a society. And the rest of society actually takes measures to protect women from that person. So misogyny, the claim that there's this widespread misogyny, it's bullshit. And the claim that misogyny even is a thing in our society, like there's no pattern of it. It doesn't exist.
No. If you want to learn more, look at my fireside chat that I did with Steve Moxon, who's a UK-based researcher who has made the argument that misogyny does not exist, and that I think he talked about how gynocentrism is like a part of our evolution. So there's no like changing it. And I thought it was a really interesting conversation. So you guys could look that up. Steve Moxon is his name. Moxon. All right, but don't do it now because we're doing a show. So she goes on. Certainly some guys are just jerks. But what about men who are more introspective? The call for men to step up and speak out is neither new nor novel, yet still seems unheard. And then she says this, quote, I think there's plenty of well-meaning reasons why men may feel like it's not appropriate for them to talk about it, she continues. I think sometimes the way white folks don't like to talk about race, and they say, we just want to center the person who's most impacted, so it's not my role to do anything or take a space and speak up. That sounds like the progressive way of avoiding confrontation, but it doesn't really reflect like reality. But we know that when white folks take up space and say the right thing in rooms of other white people, so not with blacks around because that would be racist, apparently, that is the most shifting activity that can happen. More sometimes than any protest or any person writing a letter to the editor or anything like that. And we need men to be speaking up in that way as well. But I think men, sometimes they think, I'm not a woman, this doesn't affect me the most, end quote.
But, you know, they'll say stuff like this. But when the person most affected is not the person they want to focus on, and you speak up for that person, they get mad.
Yep.
And a great example of that is people who speak up for the baby in the abortion controversy.
Mm-hmm.
Like they get livid. And they've gone to the point where they're quite polarized about this, and they're quite they exaggerate to a degree that is just ludicrous, honestly. Like women who argue, and I've even seen pro-abortion men do this, but women who argue in favor of abortion rights, when you start talking about the biology of abortion and how we are talking about something that is genetically human, that it, under scientific criteria for life, it is a living thing, it is an organism, it is not just tissue, and it is genetically distinct from the mother. So it is a genetically distinct living human organism. And whether you call that genetically distinct living human organism a baby or a fetus, it is a developing young human that we're talking about. And we should always talk about abortion from the perspective of we are killing a living human being, because we are. That's what abortion is. And if you can't be honest about it, then you already are admitting that you know you are doing something profound and deep that you don't want to talk about that way, because if it happens to be wrong, then it is profoundly and deeply wrong, right? So that's avoidance, and they get very angry. So when you start talking about that, then they flip to it's an invader, and they will ascribe agency to the living human organism that a moment ago they denied sentience. They literally will tell you, we can kill it because it doesn't know that it's dying. We can kill it because it's not conscious, right? Which, if you said, okay, well, if we apply that to women, okay, if they're not conscious, then it's not rape, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody would accept that. No, nobody but a rapist would accept that, right? But when you apply it to a helpless baby, all of a sudden, almost half the population will. And it's the conversation is not honest. So when they start with that dishonest perspective, you get all kinds of bizarre things. They describe it as a parasite, even though it was created through the actions of the mother's body following her choice to have sex. And they'll describe it as an invader, as if half of its genetics did not come from her. And they'll describe it as if it has agency to choose to be conceived, even though 100% of the choices leading up to the conception involve the mother. She makes her side of every single one of those choices, and she has more choices in that than the father does. But somehow she's a victim of the conception and the result of her choices, right? So it's insane. They get very heated when you speak up for the baby. And it's the same thing in a case of false allegation, right? You speak up for falsely accused men, and you speak up in a way that condemns not just the false accuser, but the society that automatically believes her, and the legislation that supports her and protects her from accountability, and provides her with a weapon to use against an innocent man, right? You speak up like that, and all of a sudden they're angry and condemning the falsely accused. Well, if you weren't a bad guy, you wouldn't get accused. If you weren't hanging out with the wrong people, you wouldn't get accused. Be careful who you have sex with, or you wouldn't get accused. And like everything that you would say, that you would criticize saying to a rape victim, they have a version of that for falsely accused men. And then, of course, the worst one is comparing real rape victims to not false accusers, but the falsely accused, right? As if they're pitted against each other, as if every falsely accused man who gets justice somehow takes justice away from one of us. It doesn't happen that way. It doesn't work that way, right? But they'll talk about it that way because they are angry that you spoke up for the wrong kind of victim.
Mm-hmm.
So like, this is bullshit. This is such bullshit.
Yeah.
And this is why women like AOC are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Like this is James Bond villain shit right here.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And again, you know, she's blaming men for doing what feminists told them to do, which is essentially, you aren't allowed to have an opinion on this because you own a penis, so stay out of it. And that's with like abortion and basically everything else that feminists have decided is a women's issue, which is everything. So when men just say, okay, and they show themselves out, then AOC says, men should be talking about this. Why aren't you? But then, of course, she wants it to be under certain conditions. So like, men should be doing this in spaces where they're with other men and there's no women around. And then she goes, but I don't think it's happening because I don't ever see it. Well, yeah, because you're a fucking woman and you don't think men should be saying anything. So
Right.
even if they are, and I'm sure that there are some, I mean, I think that men have been so profoundly cucked by feminism that they have been like gaslit and programmed to have like, you know, these boilerplate talking point responses to anything that they think is a women's issue. So like a man could, and they could be like, you know, tell you something red-pilled 1 second, which they think they can do in the safety of, you know, this private conversation. Like, man, I met a guy at the dog park. I think I may have brought this up, and I apologize if I brought this up. But I went to the dog park with JoJo, and there was this guy there with his dog, and he seemed like a nice man, and he and I got to talking, and it turned into a conversation about what I do. And he started telling me stories of terrible experiences that he and friends of his have had with women and with specifically the system. You know, ways they got screwed over in a divorce, ways they got screwed out of their kids, ways that, you know, one guy was like falsely accused of like domestic violence or something. And, you know, the police showed up and they kicked his ass and they dragged him to prison or to jail or whatever. And he went on and on about this. And I was like, yeah, these are things that can be done to women, and like that it exists, right? And we talked a little bit about abortion, and I mentioned that, well, the problem with that is that men don't get a say regardless, and we're basically just going to go with the woman, whatever she decides to do, and all of society has to arrange itself around her choice. So if she says, I'm going to keep it, and the man is like, I don't want you to keep it because I can't afford it, she's like, I don't care, fuck you, you're going to be giving me child support. And then if it's the reverse and he's like, I'd like to keep it, and she's like, no, fuck you, I'm going to kill it. So like, men don't get a say, and they can't even like say that they have an opinion before people shame them. And he agreed with everything. And then suddenly he flips and starts talking about how, you know, like any man who supported Roe v. Wade should be castrated. And it all sounded like his talking points were all pre-programmed. He was just like, her body, her choice. So, you know, when you guys see like videos of feminist protesters and they're just saying the same thing over and over, they're literally programmed. They're just responding to their NPC scripts and they're just putting them out there. And you could like run into someone who understands these problems, but still switches to their programming because they're afraid that they're getting a little too far off of the appropriate talking points. So they bring it back. And I was just like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, I thought that we just talked about this.
You know, this is something that Yuri Bezmenov talked about, and it is programming. It is literally like programming, and it will take a generation or two of education that is almost like cult deprogramming to eliminate this. And it's not just with that issue; it's with every political issue.
It is
like
there is a talking point for everything.
Well, it's not just the talking points. It is an actual way of thinking. And I would compare it to just specifically cults.
It is.
Minus the bit about isolating yourself, because these people don't isolate themselves. They actually want to impose the cult on the public. But the reality is this is brainwashing. I don't know how else to describe it, but cult brainwashing. And there's a switch, not exactly a like a light switch type switch, but a threshold that you hit with that type of programming where your level of discomfort for thinking for yourself, your discomfort with the not obeying the programming hits a point where you can't move forward anymore.
Yeah, I think he was on the verge of experiencing cognitive dissonance. And
well, it's cognitive dissonance, but there's something else as well. You have a thick a miasma, I guess, I don't know, of belief armor around you when you're in that type of a cult and you believe that type of thing. Because I used to be this way about the death penalty. And it wasn't just talking points. It was, this is so hard to explain because I didn't go through cult deprogramming. I broke through the cognitive dissonance because another issue that I'm very passionate about conflicted with this. I read a news story about an intellectually disabled man who was probably wrongly executed, and he was terrified, and his ordeal was described in detail by somebody who probably was very anti-death penalty, and it broke through my belief armor. But it's like if you're trying to move forward through a normal atmosphere and all of a sudden it's so thick and so uncomfortable that it's like moving through jello that is charged with electricity, and the farther in you get, the more you get zapped.
Yeah.
And mentally though. Yeah. And so you're the way to become comfortable is to turn around immediately and go back the other way and start with your talking points that you're comfortable with, that are platitudes, because talking points are all just platitudes. They don't have any real meaning. Her body, her choice has zero real grounded meaning. Her body, her choice could be used to justify beating the shit out of your children because you're just using your body to do it. Yeah. It can be used to justify picking up a gun and shooting someone because you're just using your body to do it. You're choosing what you want to do with your body. And if we disregard the effect of your body and your choice on another living human being in one case, why can't we disregard it in every case?
Well,
right?
I think
so that has no meaning. But these platitudes, they are a way to put your belief armor back on and protect yourself from that miasma of thick cognitive dissonance that zaps you with like an emotional kind of pain because you are going against your programming. And it's hard to break through that.
Yeah.
It's painful to break through that. Like, I went through grief breaking through that, but you can do it.
Yeah.
You just have to decide that you're going to.
Yep. Yeah. But you also have to recognize that it's happening. And I think that this
and most people don't.
Yeah, they don't. They think that what they believe is their own beliefs, and that they've like done all the work and they really understand why they believe it. But when you press them, all they have are those platitudes. And then there's like the idea that, well, you know, most other people believe this, and this goes back to the gaslighting that the left does with regards to making you think that their positions are not just the morally superior positions, but they're also the most popular positions, while also claiming that you are part of the underdog class. Don't ask questions, just consume product and get excited for next product. Okay, so anyway, back to this article. We're going to go into more about what men need to do. So she says, but men also keep quiet, Ocasio-Cortez pointed out, because of the burdens and antiquated expectations of masculinity. Now we're going to get into toxic masculinity stuff. Yeah. Feminist writers and thinkers have raised this notion for decades, pointing out how men themselves are victimized by a toxic societal construct. Men suffer from being under patriarchy, the Congresswoman said. They don't go to the doctor. They suffer from...
Oh my God, I have to stop you there, okay? So women complain that men don't go to the doctor, but what do women call it when men admit they don't feel good and they go to the doctor and they take a day off from work and they sleep on the couch and drink soup and stuff like that?
Man flu.
Man flu. Oh, he's got man flu. What a wimp. How dare you take some time off? How dare you experience suffering in front of me? Like, why would your man go to the doctor? Why would he take care of himself? Why would he even admit to you that he is suffering if you're going to do that? There's no social construct. It's you. It's your fault. You did it, lady. You did that. Society didn't do that to him. You did.
Yeah. Also, I think that men are generally more likely to wait until something looks pretty serious before they go to the doctor. Whereas I think women are more likely to go to the doctor for anything. So,
well, and then the other thing is, like, all right, here you go. How many pages of women's magazines are dedicated to what women call self-care? Like, the entire fucking magazine.
Yes.
Women invented mental health days off from work. Women invented spa care for mental health, right? Men, if they go to spa care, it's because they're in pain.
Did women also
if they go get a massage, it's because something hurts.
Did women also invent, like, therapy dogs?
Probably. I don't know, but
I would guess
so the therapy dogs have a purpose in that they actually can detect things, changes in your like now.
Well, maybe I'm more like
the other one. It's not real therapy dogs.
No, not. I don't mean real therapy dogs or dogs that get assigned
emotional
to
support animals.
Yeah, emotional support dogs.
That's a different thing, right?
Yes,
emotional support animals, and there's a significant difference between an emotional support animal and a therapy animal. You can't, for instance, have a therapy cat. It cannot be done. Cats are trainable, but they're not trainable on the level that it takes for an animal to be a therapy animal. But most of the people that have emotional support animals, it's a cat, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. Dog. It can be, it can be your anxiety sink. That's fine. But y'all don't need to take it in the grocery store, okay?
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna bring in my fucking emotional support cougar.
Yeah, right. Well, what I'm getting at is
her name is Mary.
I'm not talking about dogs that get, given to veterans that are dealing with PTSD.
There are seizure dogs and everything like that. That's a whole different thing. Like, I knew that's not what you were. That's not what you meant.
Yeah, I was talking about those little. It's usually the little dogs, and they're basically used by women as
Yeah.
it's like a teddy bear. It's
Your
like a stuffed
therapy animal
that
does
they
not fit in your
squeeze.
purse, okay?
No,
If it fits in your purse, it's not a fucking
It,
therapy animal.
it should.
Right, buy a fucking teddy bear, bitch.
Yeah, or like I don't know, like a guinea pig.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm gonna get back to the article. They suffer from much higher rates of completed suicides. So, she knows that men commit suicide, but I don't think going to the doctor has much to do with that. That might be something else. Even though they report lower levels of depression, that doesn't mean that they suffer from it less. Just a couple years ago, the American Psychological Association, by the way, the American Psychological Association runs all of its therapeutic practices for men under the toxic masculinity model. So if it results in more men committing suicide, you guys know why. They released a very deep paper and campaign about how these traditional cultural markers of masculinity, stoicism, competition, domination, and dominance, which I was like, domination, dominance? They sound like they're the same thing, but okay, are leading to mental health issues for men. There's a stigma around men being vulnerable, end quote.
Okay, again, like the only time there's a stigma around men being vulnerable is when it comes into conflict with women's interests, right? And that is something that feminists are more responsible for causing than they are responsible for alleviating. And the answer to this is always this, all right? If a man is suicidal because his ex-wife won't let him see his children, do you still care about what he's going through? Because if you don't, if immediately you're going to flip to condemning him as a misogynist who wants to dominate and control his ex-wife when he's really just heartbroken because he loves his children and he wants to be their dad, then you don't give a fuck. You don't give a flying fuck about men. You don't care. You're not trying to help them. You're trying to gaslight them. And you can go fuck right the hell off.
Right.
Yeah. And that's exactly what he's doing. All these the traditional cultural markers of masculinity, stoicism, competition, dominance, whatever. Those are all good things. Those are beneficial things for men.
That's like in many cases, it's the only thing men have.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
I'm like everybody's like thinks I'm a terrible person. I don't have any friends. I voted the wrong way. I'm being excluded. I'm being isolated. I'm being told to fuck off. My wife left me. I guess I can't be stoic though, because that only makes it worse.
Well, and they go real black and white on this, right? Stoicism is good and bad. Competition is good and bad. Domination, good and bad. Dominance, good and bad, right? So you get injured and you have to get to the hospital and there's nobody to take you to the hospital. Stoicism might save your life, right?
Yep.
But if somebody comes along and says, well, yeah, you're injured, but you have to stay on the job. We're not going to let you go to the hospital. We're not going to take you to the hospital, right? That's an invalid, wrong demand for stoicism where you should be showing compassion. Right. So what feminists are doing is looking at the stoicism that men are forced to exhibit because society doesn't have compassion for men in circumstances when we should have compassion for them, and blaming men for that when we should be blaming the people who lack compassion.
Yeah.
So it's not stoicism that's bad. It's when stoicism is demanded to relieve other people of their obligation to exhibit compassion in a circumstance where they would be compassionate if the person they were looking at was a woman.
Yeah. Well, again, like what kind of world? Because AOC doesn't think that these traits should exist. Or at least not at like the rates that they are. So what kind of world would we live in if it weren't for stoicism? And I know that there's like, all of these traits can be negative, but I think in general they're not. And in most men they're not either.
The thing is that it's not that they don't think these traits should exist. They'll say they don't think these traits are good. They'll say they don't think these traits exist, or should exist. But when they need these traits, they will demand them. That's the thing. They're very two-faced about this. They're very hypocritical about this.
Yeah, of course.
They want a man to be stoic about his own experience when his baby mama, wife, girlfriend, whatever, fling is considering an abortion. They don't want him to have feelings that for himself that interrupt that. Right. That stoicism is good stoicism in the feminist eye, and they'll demand that stoicism. Right. They want a man to be stoic enough to not fear the pain that he'll suffer if it has the hell beat out of him because he's protecting a woman from a would-be rapist. Right. They want that stoicism. They want that toughness. They want that competition. They want that domination. They just won't admit it any other time.
No, they want men to...
It's completely two-faced. They're lying through their fucking teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like they want men to hate this about themselves and be conflicted about this, but not completely eliminate it because they may need them to essentially reach in and grab it. Grab hold of their competitiveness or their ability to dominate, but only under the direction and control of people like AOC. Which are
these cultural markers of masculinity, right? Mm-hmm. Feminists don't really believe they're bad. They want you to believe they're bad so that you will hand control of them over to women.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, because you can't really get rid of it. So, because I think it is in men's nature to express these traits in some fashion. So, anyway, the key to combating that stigma, she said, is for men to talk directly with other men. I think something that's really powerful for men is to share their stories of growth. All right, just going to say, no, you don't. You don't really believe that. Because when men get together with other men, feminists immediately go in and say, what's going on over here? What are you guys talking about? What is this? What is this? What's with this gathering of men? What's with all this testosterone?
How dare you?
Yeah, like they don't. When they say this, what they mean is they want it to be a highly controlled environment where men can get together and basically only talk about how they can better serve the interests of feminists. So it's all about like being an ally or, a beta or whatever you want to call it. So soy boys can do this because they're basically not a threat to feminists. And I think that regular men, high T men, average T men are a threat. This goes back to the Andrew Tate thing. So Andrew Tate is very popular with very young men, like preteen boys and up, who are sharing his video clips of him saying inspirational things that men like to hear, or advice for men. Nothing really about women, or not much, but mostly it's about like self-improvement, self-growth stuff, right? And these young guys really like this, and and it's giving them something to pursue, which most content that is considered safe for men, or most of the content they might see like in school or at home or wherever, right? When they turn on the TV, it's all like anti-male and, or it's promoting a kind of soft masculinity, which none of these guys really like because they still are men and their testosterone is like shooting up right now. And so feminists think that guys like Andrew Tate are just really dangerous. And they'll claim that he's dangerous for women, but he's dangerous to them. He's dangerous to them because he's shattering their whole narrative. And for a while, I think these feminist women thought they had complete control over like what kids were exposed to from the moment they're born all the way through their education. And so now there are young boys that are like, I don't know, I don't buy this. I think I want to watch this guy. And they're freaking out because they're slipping out of the matrix. And this is like why they get so upset. And this is the reason that I know they don't really want men talking to each other. They want certain men talking to other men in a specific way. So it's basically,
in the approved fashion. I gotta say, I've been reading between the lines throughout this article, and I'm getting a real good picture of what her husband is like.
Whose husband? The writer's?
No, AOC's husband, the Riley Roberts, the white guy, right? The white guy.
That poor guy.
Jeez.
Yeah, that sucks. That poor guy.
Beta.
Right,
so there was another article that I found when I was looking at this article, and so there's a quote in here from AOC, and she goes, "Oh, I feel like I won the men lottery in life," she says. I feel like not just referring to her husband, but her father, the cousin she grew up with, even her chief of staff. It's the presence of good men that has shown me what kind of men are possible in this world. So you took a look at the men around your life, and this is how you want them to behave? This is what you think good, quote unquote, good men should be like? And if anybody has a question or a challenge to that, you're going to say what? That I don't know.
Yeah. All right, back to the article. Let me just make sure. Oh, I did get a super chat. So Albatross gives us $5 and says, "Can't talk because busy cleaning. Y'all are doing great. Here's a couple bucks. Thank you, Albatross." And then Miss Anne of Art gives us $5. Says, "If a farmer comes into the ER before finishing the fence, it's bad." Yeah. Thank you.
Or before finishing the harvest.
Yeah, that was a super chow. So, thank you for that. And I think we got about 10 minutes before I gotta wrap up the show. So we'll see how far we get into this article. The key to combating that stigma, she said, so the stigma of, being masculine, which of course she thinks is they're chains, guys. They're chains. Did you know that? Is for men to talk directly with other men. I think something that's really powerful for men is to share their stories of growth, which again, I already said, it's bullshit. She doesn't really want men talking to each other. I asked her about men who may be angered by the conservative attacks on bodily autonomy and committed to personal change, but carry shame about past behavior. What does that mean? Oh, for being men? You mean like original sin?
This is basically her saying that if society doesn't teach men not to rape, that they automatically must have done things when they were younger that are rapey. But she's saying it from a perspective of somebody who thinks that taking any kind of chances in a relationship with a woman where you are trying to move it to the next level is rapey. Like, even if you ask, right? Mm-hmm. Even if you go for first base and then go for second base and all that, no, that's rapey to them. So they then if they teach a guy that that's rapey, and of course guys and gals will naturally do this when they are alone, when they're teenagers, then he's going to feel guilty about it, even if the girl was an active participant, and even if she was the one initiating. He's going to feel guilty about it because they've convinced him that he should.
Yeah.
Yep.
They too should speak up, she replied. It's not about men posturing in public as if they are perfect, she said, rather explicitly noting that they are not.
Well, no, it's about women posturing in public that they are perfect.
Right.
Yeah, right. Do you guys remember this? Okay. They are amazing. Oh, I'm sorry. There are amazing men in this world, and not men as a final product. So they're always a work in progress, guys. There are men on incredible journeys, internal journeys,
right?
Journeys of transcending beyond just anger as the acceptable masculine emotion. That's like
what?
Yeah, they're always saying that like the only emotion that men have is anger. It's so stupid.
This is why feminists keep calling me a man online, because I sound angry. Because I am.
Oh my God, they should listen to me when in person. Holy shit. You think I'm bad now? Just catch me at work. I'm motherfucking all day.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yep,
I'm surprised I still have a job. Listen, if
What is
cursing,
it that the Jewish conspirators call Jewish adjacent people? Like, I have Jewish ancestors, and I get called a crypto Jew. So we're crypto men. That's what it is.
You're crypto men, yeah.
Yes. Well, and I do have male ancestors.
That's
sounds
true.
cool.
You have some male DNA.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, this is just more gaslighting. So they want men to think that their only emotion is anger, and of course, it's just not true. Like, do you think that the founding fathers were just like beating each other up to like figure? I mean, I know there were fights and arguments and debates, but like, really, like all men, every man that resolved anything did so with a fucking fight and violence. That's so stupid. Like this
no,
is so...
Brian. They were beating themselves up because they realized how wrong they were.
Yeah, that's what they
remind
should have
everybody.
done.
Right.
When women talk about male violence and how men solve everything by fighting, the best response to that is to get on YouTube, type in quotes "chick fight," and then just post the results.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Just show
And
you can even contrast them against men fights, and they're nothing alike. Like in
Right.
most cases, men it probably turns into like a wrestling match, and then one guy dominates the other guy, and then that's the end.
Well,
Right.
and it's the sheer number. Like, we get told this.
Oh
as
yeah, the
though
sheer number.
Women
Yeah.
and girls don't do this, but the sheer number of chick fights that you can find just on YouTube, like, that's just the ones that people were there for with a camera. Okay.
Right.
And this is not unusual at all. And what was communicated to me when I was growing up as a teenage girl was that when you're mature, when you're an adult, you don't do this shit, right? You don't solve things by hitting people, and you don't hang out with people who solve things by hitting each other. It's not just unladylike, it's immature, it's not adult. But I look around, and women my age, I'm 50, and women my age are doing that. Like, you guys are getting to the age where when you fall down because somebody hit you, you're going to break a fucking hip.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't go to bars because you find this kind of shit there. Right.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
women act like chimpanzees chimpanzees are more peaceful than that. It's not even a color thing, right? White women do this, black women do this, Hispanic women do this. Just depending on what neighborhood you're in, they may get out blades. And this is not a masculine thing. This is a maturity thing.
It is
totally.
It's ultimately a maturity thing. And
well, see, I don't know how much I would classify it as an immaturity thing, because there's a big distinction between the way men fight and the way women fight, right? Women fight to the death, right? Men fight, they determine a winner and a loser. They can get up and shake hands and have a beer afterwards. And even if they don't go to all that lengths, once the fight has been, done and settled out, right? That's it. That's the end of it, right? They go their separate ways. There's a level of maturity in that women do not possess, right? And listen, I don't agree with violence, but sometimes I understand it. You know what I mean?
Women will also fight over things that men don't fight over too.
Yes.
Like,
well, that's
a guy looks at another guy's girlfriend, the other guy's like, she's with me, right? A girl looks at another girl's boyfriend, and
that's it.
Holy hell, all hell breaks. She doesn't even have to actually look, or worse, he looks at her, and he doesn't even have to actually look. Like, we'll go back to Mr. Ballin on this one, but I just listened to a thing that he did, a story he told about a girl who was killed when I was in high school, by her friends over this kind of shit. Like, literally,
I know.
They thought their boyfriends were looking at her, and they spread rumors that she was screwing around with everybody's boyfriends.
Yeah,
and then she got the shit beat out of her.
Lindsay and I watched
then
it the other day.
Like, it's just an insane, and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, holy shit, she could have gone to school at my school. Yeah, I knew girls that would do that. I knew girls that would do that shit. The only difference is they were not in my class. The girls in the class ahead of mine and the girls in the class behind mine. I got on the wrong side of a girl that was like that, and really had difficulty navigating the situation. So yeah, like there's a difference, not just in how women fight, but in why women fight. Like, a woman can bitch up one side and down the other about another woman's looks or hair, and that will start a fight. A guy can call another guy ugly, and he'll be like, okay, fuck you too. And that's it. That's the whole conversation. Okay, fuck you too. I don't like your shoes. Like, that's it. Unless they wanted to fight and they were looking for an excuse, that's not a reason that a couple of guys will get into a fight with each other.
Yeah. All right. So back to the article, I think. Let me just double check super chats here. All right. So she says, men who dive into, well, wait a minute. There are amazing men in this world and not men as a final product. There are men on incredible journeys, internal journeys, journeys of transcending beyond just anger as the acceptable masculine emotion, she would tell me in a subsequent conversation. Men who dive into their compassion, into their sadness, and into their insecurity and explore it and work through it. The most powerful...
Except that she gets mad when they do that.
Yeah, and also, like, whether or not this diving into your compassion, sadness, and insecurity, whether or not that's a good thing is purely determined by what men may find if they come out the other end. So if they get red-pilled, that's obviously the bad kind of exploration. Because red pill men, I think, a truly red pill man, the reason why he's really a threat to women and to feminism and to wokeness and all this progressivism is because that man can say no to them. And they probably will say no. Because those men, if they're, truly red-pilled guys, at least in my opinion, they will find that they are individuals. They don't have to do what people tell them. They don't have to serve women. They don't have to serve society. They can choose to live their life however they want, and they can reject this kind of like these dogmatic demands that come from this cult. And so because that men can do that and they can say, no, thank you. I don't want nothing to do with this shit. Or they might even like outright oppose them. I'm not going to let you do this to other men. And so I'm going to spread the word about you guys. Well, that's what they really, really hate. So,
yeah.
The most powerful and persuasive things a person can say on any given issue, she told me the first day that we met in her office, is sharing their personal experience and personal story. So I will say that part is probably more true, because I think that the one advantage that the left has, or one of the advantages, is they know the importance of story and narrative and aesthetic. And so they use it. They use it to tell lies. They use it to manipulate people into believing, their worldview. They construct like false, monsters. That's why they give us patriarchy. That's white supremacy, whatever. And the thing that I think we do need to do is we have to have our own stories and base them in truth. And I think we can win, because that is their advantage, is they have these narratives, and everyone loves, story is how we communicate values and ideas. This is why what's going on in the culture war, with TV and film and video games and all that, it's really important because those stories that are told that way, they have tremendous impact. And obviously these people have taken that over. So I think she's right when she says that, but she's also trying to sell us on all of the personal experience and story that she has approved of that's out there in the ether right now. So if she tells a story, which she does frequently because she's always lying, then she wants that to be taken just as seriously, right? Like when she said she almost got raped, or she thought she was going to get raped when she was hiding out in, what was it, 2 blocks away from where the insurrection was happening?
Right?
Yeah.
Where is she? So that's a narrative, that's a story, and it does emotionally affect people. So I think that we would be, I mean, it's obviously a lie, and we should definitely expose lies. But I think we
it's actually funny that she regrets not being there so badly that she had to lie and say that she was. Clearly, she's just terrified, right? Because she was, wants to have been there so badly that she would make up that she was. Like that just speaks to how terrifying the situation really was. Because I know, like, when the building next door to the building I was in caught fire, I just desperately wished that was our apartment. Like, just totally. Just like, it was just such an awful thing to have happen that I wished it was us. No, like, obviously this was not that big of a deal if somebody wished to have been involved in it so badly that she would lie and say she was there when she wasn't, instead of going, thank God I didn't have to go through that. Like, obviously, it was really just nothing.
Yep.
Huge nothing burger in terms of the threat level.
Oh, of course. But yeah, like, it does sort of point to the power of narrative, and I think that's why I think that, more people that want to oppose this stuff should probably, like, find ways of, like, using story. I think that we do that. We talk about anecdotal experiences. We talk about things from our childhood, because you want to show people, like, yeah, I've kind of experienced this firsthand, and then maybe other people, like, in our audience, will also say, well, actually, I've had this happen.
Yeah.
And that's a story.
Yeah. And a lot of our stories are, here's what happened, here's what I learned. And like, they don't do that. It's, here's what happened, and so you have to feel this way about this issue.
Yeah, exactly. Here's what you have learned.
And here's what you have to take from it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's after 9, so I got to stop it here. Do you guys have any final thoughts on this AOC thing so far? I might, if there's more, then go ahead. She's
obviously going to go down the whole toxic masculinity narrative. So I just want to remind everybody where that narrative came from. The originator of the term toxic masculinity as a feminist term used by feminist academics and so on is known today as Rayon Connell. Rayon Connell is a trans woman, and the toxic masculinity narrative, the academic writing that was used to communicate this, was written by Rayon Connell under the dead name Robert, right? So that was during the ordeal of gender dysphoria that leads to becoming a trans woman, right? So Connell was rejecting masculinity while writing this stuff. At the same time, Connell was studying Andrea Dworkin. A great deal of the writing as to what constitutes toxic masculinity sounds almost identical to things that Dworkin wrote or said about men in general. And so all Connell did was say, this is what the bad men are like, and it's because they're pressured by society to be this way. And he mixed it with Marxist concepts. Like, hegemonic masculinity is taken from the Marxist term cultural hegemony, which is essentially about the in power group using social pressure to make their culture the dominant culture in a society. And he translated that into hegemonic masculinity, wherein men make masculinity the default status or concept for everything, and then turned around and took toxic masculinity and made that concept, these are the disapproved ways of living as a man, and took that as something that most men suffer from, and so on. So this was, and then after transitioning to be a trans woman didn't change anything, right? So the concepts regarding toxicity, the concepts regarding dysfunction might be rooted in experiences that Connell had that influenced that dysphoria, but they may not be applicable to the greater male population, especially not men that a trans woman would call cis men. Just a point to keep in mind whenever you hear toxic masculinity. And the other question I will ask is for feminists who are listening, would you still, like, you say that men don't talk about their problems, you say that men don't speak up for themselves, you say that men don't cry when they need to cry, that they don't express their emotions, right? Will you still encourage men to talk? And will you still be willing to listen when what they have to tell you is not what you had planned to hear?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't hold my breath. So we're gonna end it here. Are you guys still there?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we're gonna end the show here. I have to go pick up my wife, so I'm not gonna be able to do a patron show. But I will try and make it up maybe tomorrow. For now, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed today, and most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR Talk. I look forward to your comments, and we will talk to you all in the next video. My favorite big booty Latina.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.